I read 125 books this year, and these are my absolute favorites. I'm so excited to talk about these. I was planning on filming my worst books video today, but as I started getting ready to film, I just felt way more excited to talk about these books. So we're gonna do my best books today, and then my next video will be my worst books. And we're just gonna get into it. There is really no order to this. I don't really have like a ranking or a top favorite. They're all just kind of on one level. So we're gonna start with Iron Widow by Shirin J. Zhao. If you want female rage literally injected into your veins, read this book. This is actually the first book that I read this year, and it remained one of my favorite books of the year. I really set the tone of the year from the beginning. This is a YA dystopian sci-fi that takes place in this world where humans are having to fight against these aliens that are basically these big gigantic monsters. And so in order to fight them, they build these giant robotic suits that humans pilot. All of these ships are piloted by one man and one woman, and the woman always dies for some reason. And the main character, her sister, was one of these pilots who died. And so now she wants to get revenge. So she basically like infiltrates the government and works her way up the rungs in order to burn it all to the ground in revenge for her sister. It's so good. If you love an unhinged bad bitch queen, Zetian is the girl for you. This also has a really great romantic relationship dynamic. It is polyamorous between Zetian and these two guys. I just love the world building, the politics. The fight scenes in here were so good. This book is compared a lot to Pacific Rim. I feel like that is kind of like the general style of the book, but Zetian definitely became one of my favorite main characters. She does not give a fuck. She is a woman with a mission. She doesn't care about anybody else. She's like, I'm here for revenge. I don't care about y'all. I don't care about nothing. I just want to burn the world down for my sister. And I love that about her. Moving to a completely opposite end of the spectrum, we have The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields. Like a little bit of Bridgerton mixed with practical magic, super gay. This is a really cute sapphic cottagecore cozy fantasy romance that I adored. This book to me felt like a historical romance that just also happens to have a little bit of magic in it. We're following a main character who is coming into her inheritance of this honey magic, and she basically is tasked with taking care of this island, protecting it, protecting the magic there. And she meets a girl who does not believe in magic, and she's determined to prove to her that magic is real, and they fall in love with each other, and it's just so cozy and cute. And this book really was like the perfect book for me. It combined all the things that I love into one perfect little book. This also wins the award for one of my favorite covers of the year. This cover is just so beautiful. Next up, I have Mary, An Awakening in Terror by Nat Cassidy. So much has happened. I thought that I knew what was going on, and then things just happened, and now I'm like, 2 + 2 is 4, and 5 + 5 is 10. What the hell is going on here? This is a horror book that has not left my mind since I read it. This book is following Mary, who keeps having all of these very strange visions of dead bodies, and there's this voice that keeps speaking to her in her mind, telling her to do crazy things. Nobody believes her. She goes to the doctor to try to explain to them what's happening, and they're like, I think it's actually just that you have menopause. That's what this is. You're not seeing things or hearing voices. You're just going into menopause. And they're completely ignoring her. She ends up going back to her hometown and sort of getting wrapped up in this very bizarre cult environment that is going on in the town surrounding a serial killer who presided there in the past. This book was so good. One of my favorite horror books that I've ever read. Mary is such a fascinating character, and being in her head was such a weird experience where I'm like, I'm kind of rooting for you, but I also am not, because what you're doing is fucked up. But I also loved her. And then there were times where I was like, girl, what are you doing? This is definitely kind of like a slower burn, slow-paced horror, but some of the imagery in here is like so haunting. I'm like not even kidding when I tell you it's been like 7 months since I read this, and I do not stop thinking about it. Next, I have All Roads Lead Here by Mariana Zapata. No, actually, what witchcraft is in this book? Because I think I was just possessed. This is another romance book that I loved. This is only the second Mariana Zapata book that I read. The first one that I read was From Luke Off with Love, and I only gave that one 3 stars. I did enjoy it. This one made me understand the hype. I get it now. I get it. Her books are very long, but I read this in one sitting. Almost 600 pages. I read it in one sitting because I could not stop. This one is following a main character who is returning back to her hometown because her mom recently passed, and so she ends up renting a garage apartment from this guy. But when she turns up there, she realizes that the landlord had no idea that the garage apartment was being rented out, and he's very angry. And it was actually his teenage son who set up this arrangement. The dad is like really does not want her there, but she convinces him to let her stay. And it's a very slow burn romance, but I think what I loved about this is that there's so much outside of the romance that I also enjoyed. I really like this main character's journey with her grief. There's also a lot of like side characters in this kind of small town environment. I don't know, I really love this one, and even though it is so long, this is one that I think was done very well, and I'm so excited to read more from Mariana Zapata. Next up, I have a book that was actually a reread for me this year. I wouldn't normally include a reread, but I have upped my rating on this book from the first time that I read it, so I am including it. And that is Stolen by the Wolves by Lynx Robinson. This is a Viking Omegaverse romance. However, this is one of the best fantasy romances I've ever read, and I feel like if this was marketed more as a romantasy or like a fantasy romance, this would be so much more popular, okay? Ignore the Omegaverse, okay? Just ignore that it's Omegaverse if that's not your thing. It is such an amazing fantasy romance. The world building in here is so good. It is historical, like Viking setting. The world building was just so good. And honestly, if you take out all of the romance of it and it was just a fantasy book, I think I still would love it. The romance does play a really big part, but this is one of those fantasy romances where I feel like the world building and the plot can stand on its own. I also think this would be a good introduction into Omegaverse because it's very like, at least this first book, it's very Omegaverse light. It's kind of just dipping your toes into the Omegaverse pond. There's Vikings, ritual sacrifices, prophecies, pillaging, war, fighting. Oh, it is just so great, so great. I did want to include this in this video because I don't think I really talked about it that much last year when I first read it, and I'm obsessed with it now. Next is a book that I actually was looking for. I think I've already packed it away. As you can see, I've started packing a lot of my books. I think I accidentally packed it, but that is In the Dreamhouse by Carmen Maria Machado. I've never loved a memoir this way. Genuinely, just the way that it was written was so creative and captivating. I felt like I couldn't look away. This is a memoir, actually a nonfiction memoir. It is the most interesting, creative memoir that I have ever read. It's very hard to explain how it's written, but it's done in this style where it's a bunch of vignettes that are in different writing techniques. But the memoir is following her first queer relationship and how it ended up turning into a very abusive and toxic situation, how the abuse kind of slowly started to happen and she wasn't really picking up on it because it was her first relationship with a woman, and so she was overlooking a lot of the red flags. I think it's a very interesting book that shows how abuse can happen in queer relationships, and it's just so good. Honestly, if you're not a nonfiction person or a memoir person, I still would recommend this because the way that it's written is just so captivating. Next up, I feel like I'm going all over the place with genres. Next up, we have Bride by Ali Hazelwood. And why is this book so damn good? I'm like having to stop every couple of pages because it's so cute. Another Omegaverse, 2 Omegaverses in this list. This one technically is not Omegaverse, it's like the preamble to Omegaverse. So again, if you're looking to dip your toe in the Omegaverse pond, this is a good starting place. This is basically just a paranormal romance following the heroine who is a vampire, and she gets married off to the hero who is a werewolf alpha, and they get married as a little political bargain between the vampires and the werewolves. And I just love this. This to me gave me the nostalgia of old school paranormal romance. It actually reminded me of how I felt the first time that I read the Fever series by Karen Marie Moning. If you're an OG for my channel, you will know that I was obsessed with that series back in the day. And I have, for the past like 8 years, been trying to find something that made me feel that way again, and I've been unsuccessful until now. This made me feel that way. This made me feel that way where I'm obsessed. I'm staying up all night reading it. I can't stop thinking about it. It made me feel like a teenager. Like I was just loving it. And it definitely made me understand the Allie Hazelwood hype. I also feel like I love a book that reminds me of a CW show. And I think a lot of people might find that to be insulting. I love CW, okay? I was in the trenches with CW. Thursday night, Vampire Diaries, I was sacked. Okay, this makes me feel like that. Next, I have The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Khaw. I devoured it. I loved it. 5 stars. 5 stars. I'm obsessed. This is a horror novella that I am obsessed with. I did read it 3 times this year. Granted, it is very short. The audiobook is like an hour. It's such a quick read, but it is so great. The way that I have always described this is that it is like a scarier, darker, more adult version of Over the Garden Wall. That's just how I picture it in my brain, in like the style of Over the Garden Wall. Basically, you're following the main character, who is a mermaid, and her mermaid daughters have just burned the kingdom to the ground and eaten everybody. That's where the book opens up. Her daughters eating everybody. The world is ended. And she crosses paths with this plague doctor, and they decide to journey together, and that journey takes them through a forest, and they discover this very creepy cult with all of these little children that are being controlled by these surgeons who claim that they're gods. It's very weird. It's very weird, and that's all I want to say about it because it keeps getting weird. The main character, she can't speak because her husband, prior to the book, cut her tongue out. So being in her head was very interesting, and I feel like a lot of the language that is used in this book, she's like overly descriptive about things because of the fact that she can't speak, and it just added this extra, very interesting layer to the writing. And despite the fact that it is horror, the thing that I loved most was that there was romance. I loved the romance in here. It made me cry. I was obsessed. I was living. It is such a short book and so ambitious for the amount of things that it did and the way that it made me feel in such a short amount of pages, but I just loved it. This was just definitely a very big surprise for me. I don't think everyone will love it. This is a very lowly rated book. I am on an island of one, but that's fine. I don't care. I can be the only one who loves this. The next book I have is You Again by Kate Goldbeck. If they don't kiss, I need them to kiss. The slow burn is burning. It is burning hot. They kissed and it was well worth the wait. This is a romance book that is inspired by When Harry Met Sally, but if you made it more modern and queer and messy, although, okay, When Harry Met Sally is kind of messy, this is messier, okay? This is peak mess. You have a very messy heroine. She is chaotic. She makes mistakes. She's not perfect. But I love that about her. I feel like a lot of times in romances, the character that has like more of the issues, more of the commitment issues, that is more of a whore, it's usually the man, you know? No, she's a hoe. She's scared of commitment. She's messy. And I loved that. I loved that about her. So this is about Ari and Josh. They keep meeting each other over the course of several years, and all of these interactions are bad and make them not like each other. And then one day they meet again when they're both kind of at rock bottom. They've both been dumped and are really sad, and they decide to kind of support each other through these breakups, because who better than to support you than a person you've hated for years? And that turns into friendship, and slowly they progress in their relationship. And I just loved how natural the progression of their relationship was, because like I said, it takes place over many years. They have many interactions before anything ever turns romantic, and it just felt like a very natural, realistic progression that by the time that they did fall in love, I was like, yeah, this, like, I feel it. It makes so much sense. And it actually made me realize how quickly a lot of other romances happen. I feel like, in general, the romance book timeline is very fast. And this just felt more realistic to me. Next, I have The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. Oh my God. Oh my God. This is a horror book following a main character who develops a very strong appetite for something. I wonder if you can guess what it is. She honestly is dealing with a lot. Her parents get divorced, her dad leaves, and her mom starts dating this man who is just like a leech. He sucks. He's a capital L loser, and he's always around like a freak. And she's just having a bad time. She's having a bad time adjusting. She's struggling with life, and she gets hungry. I love this book. This is definitely like a unhinged main character. Another one kind of similar to Mary, where it's like, I support you, but also respectfully, what the fuck? And then the last book that I have here is A Funny Story by Emily Henry. I did not intend to read it all in one go. I started cleaning my house yesterday and I was just listening to it. And then the next thing I know, I cleaned my entire house and I finished the book because I just never stopped. I'm gonna be honest, I never thought I would have another Emily Henry book on my favorites list. But this one changed everything. I loved this book so much. I think a lot of my love for this romance comes from the fact that I just know it in my soul that Emily Henry wrote this while watching New Girl. And that is my favorite show. There was just so many like little tiny New Girl references and things that reminded me of New Girl. Mostly being the main character Miles is totally Nick. He is totally Nick Miller coded. This is following Miles and Daphne. They are both at the start of this book in relationships with people. Their partners are best friends with each other. Daphne is about to get married and her fiance goes off on his bachelor party and comes back from it and tells her, hey, you know that female best friend I have? Yeah, I'm actually in love with her. We're running off together and I also need you to move out of our house because she's gonna move in. And Daphne's there like, huh? So Daphne and Miles end up moving in together because she has no place to go, and they're kind of like commiserating with each other over their failed relationships and how their partners left them to be together, and they end up falling in love. It is so cute. I was just obsessed. I love this. This is by far my favorite Emily Henry book. And actually, I recommended this to my mom and I had her read it too, and she also loved it, which is such a win for me because she does not read romance books ever. I have tried many times to get her to read some. She never reads them, but she read this and she loved it. So that is such a win for me. So those are all of my favorite books of this year. Honestly, overall, it was such a good reading year. I think the majority of the books that I read were 4 and 5 stars. The next video that you guys will see from me is going to be my worst books of the year. So if you liked this video, please like and subscribe and check out my Patreon where I post tons of exclusive content. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!